The Lantern House. Part 1. The House on Hemlock Street. When I was 12, my family moved to a small town in Maine, into a house that locals called the Lantern House. It wasn't the name on the mailbox or anything official, but everybody in town knew it by that name. Rumor had it that at exactly 3:03 a.m., a light would turn on in the attic, even though there was no electricity running to that part of the house. Naturally, my parents didn't believe in ghosts or town legends. They were too practical for that. My dad, an architect, was fascinated by the Victorian bones of the house, and my mom was excited about the garden. As for me, I was curious but cautious. The first night we spent there, I couldn't sleep. The wind howled through the trees like distant whispers. At exactly 3:03 a.m., I noticed a faint glow coming from the attic window. I told myself it was the moon. It had to be. But the next day, I checked the attic. No bulbs, no fixtures, not even a switch. Just old trunks, dust, and one peculiar thing, a brass lantern sitting in the middle of the floor. Part 2. The Lantern's Secret. The lantern was unlike anything I had ever seen before. It was heavy and ornate, with intricate carvings of stars and eyes all around it. When I picked it up, it felt warm, too warm for something that had supposedly been sitting untouched for years. I took it downstairs and showed it to my parents. My dad chuckled and said it was probably a decorative piece left behind by the previous owners. My mom said we should clean it and maybe use it in the garden. But I couldn't shake the feeling that it was watching me. That night, I placed it on my nightstand, unsure why I wanted it close. I fell asleep quickly, lulled by the rustling trees outside. But at exactly 3:03 a.m., I woke up. The lantern was glowing. Not just glowing, it was pulsing. And then I heard it, a soft voice, no louder than a whisper. Find the others. Part 3. The Whispering Map. The next morning, I checked the lantern. Cold. Still. No sign it had ever been lit. But curiosity got the better of me. I examined every inch of it and discovered something unusual, a tiny latch near the base. I pressed it, and with a soft click, the bottom of the lantern popped open to reveal a tightly folded piece of parchment. It was a map. Not a modern one, but something that looked centuries old. It was hand-drawn and showed a series of symbols, stars, crescent moons, and peculiar trees, leading to various points around town. One spot on the map was marked with a golden X and labeled simply, Whispering Hollow. I decided to go there after school. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend. Something about the lantern made me feel like this was my mission alone. But when I got there, someone was already waiting. A boy, my age, holding a lantern identical to mine. Part 4. The Boy with the Lantern. He stood perfectly still, the wind playing with the edges of his coat. His lantern was just like mine, brass carved with stars and eyes, and it glowed faintly even in the daylight. We stared at each other for a moment before he spoke. You heard it too, didn't you? He asked. I nodded slowly. It told me to find the others. He smiled, not a friendly smile, but one of understanding, like he'd been waiting for this moment. There are 7 of us, he said. Scattered. Chosen. Chosen for what? He didn't answer. Instead, he handed me a folded note. On it was written, Next light rises at Echo Bridge. Midnight. And just like that, he turned and walked into the woods, disappearing behind a veil of fog that hadn't been there a second ago. Part 5. Echo Bridge. I didn't tell my parents where I was going that night. I just slipped out with the lantern tucked in my backpack, the map folded in my jacket pocket. Echo Bridge was an old railway bridge that hadn't been used in years. It was half rotted and covered in ivy, hanging over a dry ravine. I reached it just before midnight. The wind had died, and the air was still, eerily still. Then the lantern started to hum. It vibrated in my hands, and the carvings glowed brighter. I held it up, and the light from it shot across the bridge like a beam, pointing to a specific stone on the other side. I crossed carefully, heart racing, and knelt by the stone. As soon as I touched it, the air filled with whispers, names, places, warnings, and a word that stood out above the rest: Guardian. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt something shift inside the lantern, like something had awakened. Part 6, the second key. After that night, strange things began to happen. My dreams became vivid and real, so real that I'd wake up with dirt on my hands or leaves in my bed. The lantern no longer just glowed, it responded to my thoughts. I went back to the attic to study the trunk where I'd first found it. Beneath a false bottom, I discovered a compartment. Inside was a small metallic object shaped like a crescent moon, a key. It had the same carvings as the lantern. That's when I realized each marked location on the map likely held a key. And maybe, just maybe, these keys were meant to unlock something greater. But what? And why had I been chosen? Before I could go further, the lantern flared bright, and an unfamiliar voice echoed through my mind. They're watching you now. Move quickly. The hollow stirs. Part 7, the gathering fog. After I found the crescent key, the days felt different. Shadows lingered a bit too long. Reflections shifted when I wasn't looking. Even the town seemed to lean inward, as if it too was waiting for something. I decided to search for the next marked location on the map, Stargazer's Hill. It was just outside town, past the old orchard, where locals used to go stargazing before light pollution dulled the skies. When I got there, the air felt thick, like walking through wet wool. My lantern glowed brighter, and I saw faint footprints leading up the hill, glowing slightly blue in the moonlight. I followed them, and at the top, I found her. A girl no older than me, sitting in a ring of stones with a lantern of her own. She looked up. "You're late," she said softly. "The fog is coming." "What fog?" She pointed behind me. I turned, and the world vanished in gray. Part 8, Lost in the Gray. The fog wasn't natural. It wasn't just mist, it was alive. It pressed in around us, swallowing sound, bending time. I could barely see the girl anymore, and my lantern flickered. "Don't let it go out," she yelled, her voice muffled and distant. "The fog feeds on silence." I instinctively shouted, anything, to keep the noise alive. "Hello? Can you hear me? What is this place?" The fog trembled with each word, retreating slightly. My lantern surged with warmth, and a beam shot into the stones at her feet. They lit up like constellations. Then, a symbol emerged from the center of the stone circle, a tree with 7 roots and 7 stars. The girl reached into the center and pulled out the second key, a golden triangle. "This is yours," she said. "Now go before it finds us." "What finds us?" I asked, but she was already gone, fading into the fog. Part 9, The Hollow Awakens. I barely made it home that night. The fog followed me to the edge of my street before dissolving under the streetlights. No one else seemed to notice it. Back in my room, I examined the new key. It hummed when placed near the crescent key. Together, they seemed to respond to the lantern, slotting into hidden grooves on its base. When I connected them, a panel on the lantern's side popped open to reveal an old parchment-thin page. It read, 3 lights to summon the hollow. 4 keys to enter. 7 guardians must awaken. It wasn't a warning. It was a ritual, and I had already started it. Part 10, The Third Guardian. The next morning, I skipped school. My thoughts were consumed by the lantern, the keys, and the prophecy. I studied the map again. One location pulsed faintly now, Blackroot Chapel. It was deep in the woods, long abandoned and surrounded by local superstition. Some said the ground there was cursed, others said it was where the veil was thinnest. Either way, I had no choice. The chapel was overgrown, but intact. I stepped inside, and the air shifted. My lantern glowed the moment I crossed the threshold. In the front pew sat a boy in a green jacket, clutching his own lantern. He looked up at me with haunted eyes. "I dreamed of you," he said. "You were on fire." I didn't know what to say. He reached into his coat and pulled out a key, silver, shaped like an eye. "They said you'd need this." He handed it to me and whispered, "The hollow is listening." Then he vanished, just like the others. Part 11, Lantern Dreams. That night, I couldn't sleep. The lantern pulsed beside my bed, and the moment I closed my eyes, I was somewhere else. A dream, but more vivid than anything I'd ever experienced. I stood on the edge of a cliff, overlooking a massive black tree with twisted branches that reached into a violet sky. Beneath it, 7 lanterns hovered, forming a circle of light, and in the middle stood a figure cloaked in shadows. "3 have awakened," it said. Its voice sounded like rustling leaves and cracking stone. "But 1 remains hidden, the corrupted." I tried to speak, but my voice failed me. The figure pointed at me. "You carry the hollow's lantern. It was never meant for you. Beware the 4th." I woke up gasping, the bed sheets soaked with sweat. The lantern was open, and the triangle key was gone. Part 12, The Corrupted One. Panic flooded me. I tore through the room, but the triangle key had vanished. The lantern was dark and cold. I ran to the attic, hoping to retrace my steps, hoping for answers. Instead, I found something I hadn't seen before, a small black envelope placed neatly on the floor. No dust on it. Recent. Inside was a note written in jagged handwriting. "The 4th has turned. Do not seek them. They will find you." A chill ran down my spine. The map lit up again, this time with a red X that pulsed like a heartbeat. A location I hadn't noticed before, Shatterglass Lake. The hollow was no longer sleeping. It was awake, and so was something else. Part 13, Shatterglass Lake. I left before dawn. The map pulsed with red, drawing me toward Shatterglass Lake, a place I'd only heard about in old stories. Stories about disappearances, about reflections that weren't your own. As I approached the water, the surface shimmered unnaturally. My lantern began to flicker between gold and violet. Something was wrong. On the far side of the lake stood a figure, tall, hunched, holding a broken lantern. The Corrupted One. I stepped closer and felt the temperature drop. "You shouldn't have come," the figure rasped. "Where's the triangle key?" I asked. They held it up. "You still think this is about light? It's not. It's about choice." And with that, they tossed the key into the lake. I dove in after it. Part 14, Beneath the Surface. The lake wasn't water. It was memory. As I sank, visions flashed before my eyes. Each lantern bearer, each guardian, each moment I had questioned my place in this story. I reached for the triangle key, spinning in the depths. When I touched it, the lake rippled and shattered like glass, throwing me into a void of stars. There, floating among the constellations, was the shadowy figure from my dreams. "You have done what few could," it said. "You've united the keys." The 4 keys floated before me, aligning into a single radiant symbol, a tree with roots, eyes, stars, and moons. "You are the anchor," the voice whispered. "The hollow is not a place, it is a balance, and it needs a keeper." I didn't know what it meant, but I said yes. Part 15, The Light Keeper. I awoke in my attic. The lantern pulsed gently beside me, whole once more. The keys were gone, absorbed into its light. The map had faded into a blank page. Outside, the sky was beginning to lighten. Birds chirped. Wind moved through the trees like a lullaby. I went downstairs. My parents were making breakfast, unaware of anything strange. The world had not ended, but it had changed. So had I. I am the light keeper now, watcher of the hollow, guardian of the balance. The lantern sleeps, but I know it will wake again when needed. And when it does, another will find it in an attic, behind dust and memory, and begin their own story. Until then, I wait. Part 16, The Flicker Returns. It had been months since the lantern last glowed. Life had returned to normal, or as normal as it could get when you're a guardian of ancient magic. I kept the lantern hidden in the attic, checking on it every night. But it never stirred. Until one evening, I returned home to find the attic door wide open. The lantern was pulsing. Softly, slowly, like it was breathing again. But this time, I wasn't alone. A girl stood in the corner, watching it. Her eyes were white, completely white, and her voice was a whisper of wind. The hollow weeps. The second rift is open. Part 17, The Keeper's Circle. She called herself Mira. I was supposed to awaken a decade from now, she said, but something pulled me forward. She wasn't just another lantern bearer. She was a seer, a kind of lantern keeper who could feel the hollow's emotions. According to her, the balance was breaking faster than expected. There's another circle, she explained. Another group of keepers, lost in time. We needed to find them. She handed me a shard of obsidian, cool and humming with energy. This will show you their dreams, she said. That night, I touched it, and was dragged into a memory that wasn't mine. A forest, fire, screams, and a boy holding a burning lantern, crying out my name. Part 18, The Memory Forest. The vision led us to a forgotten part of the woods, where trees grew twisted and the ground was damp with rot. The air smelled like burnt leaves, though nothing burned. We found the clearing from the vision, and there, half buried under ash, was a lantern. This one was blackened and cracked, but it still glowed faintly. Mira knelt beside it. He's not gone, she whispered. He's trapped. That's when the wind turned sharp. From the edge of the clearing came a voice, ancient and dry. Too late, little lights. The forest remembers. Shadows rose from the earth, whispers given form. We had no choice but to run. Part 19, The Forgotten Name. Safe for now, Mira and I camped near a frozen creek. She studied the cracked lantern, and I watched the shadows dance just outside our firelight. Who was he? I asked. She hesitated. He was like you, a light keeper, the first one. My stomach sank, but I thought I was the first. She looked at me. They erased him, hid his story, but the hollow never forgets. We sat in silence, and then on the surface of the cracked lantern, a single word began to etch itself in glowing light. Cashin. Part 20, The Rift Beneath. The obsidian shard pulsed again. This time, it didn't show us dreams. It showed us a place. Deep beneath the town, in the old mining tunnels no one dared to enter, a rift had opened, a wound in the world where the hollow bled into our reality. We climbed down with nothing but our lanterns and determination. The deeper we went, the more time twisted. Clocks spun backwards. Footsteps echoed before we made them. And then we reached the rift. It was a tear in space, pulsing violet and black, surrounded by lanterns hung upside down, each one dripping shadows. Cashin's voice echoed from within. Find me. Bring light to the dark. Part 21, The Keeper Lost. I reached into the rift. Pain surged through me. Memories that weren't mine flooded my mind. A life in another time. A battle fought alone. The light lost. And then I saw him, Cashin, trapped in a prison of fractured light, unable to move but still aware. I made a mistake, he said. I opened the first rift. I thought I could contain it. He handed me a symbol, a broken circle wrapped in flame. This is the final key, but it comes at a cost. The rift began to collapse. I grabbed his hand, and the light swallowed us both.